Responding to arguments for PMO, arguments that PMO is in some way valuable or desirable, contrary to the correct understanding that PMO is useless, not valuable, not desirable, has no good such as to make it desirable on top of the very many bad consequences that come with it, is a false premise that those who quit PMO or keep that garbage out of their life are holding themselves back from something good. 'Cause again, there's nothing good about PMO and it's surely worse than undesirable. In response to some of these arguments, oh, PMO is attractive or desirable because it allows you to see all these attractive women. One point in response to this is obviously it is well understood that there's far more to being attractive than just being visually appealing. If someone takes like vomit and colors it to be like all sparkly and then tells you to go eat that vomit, it's still vomit even though it may be visually appealing. So people can understand like someone may be very visually appealing, but it doesn't mean that that's the kind of person you want to be with. So there's more to being attractive than being visually appealing. That's the first point. But a second point is to divorce the notion of any of these women being visually appealing from the experience of PMO itself to be attractive, because that's actually what's going on. Like, it's one thing, it's already a bad argument for many reasons, one of them already being pointed out. But one may say like, oh, I'm a man, of course I'm attracted to all this stuff. But that's pretty much to say, I'm a man, of course I'm attracted to the experience of sitting behind a screen, hiding in a corner, hurting myself mentally and physically and spiritually, holding myself back from better things, doing something wrong, humiliating myself and harming myself in so many ways just to lust after a woman that I'll never be with. Or, oh, I'm a man, of course I'm attracted to the experience of sitting behind a screen, watching another man have sex through a screen. And that may sound blunt, but it's obviously a more accurate reflection of what goes on when one actually goes to watch pornography. On top of the argument to not find these women attractive, period, because there is far more to being attractive than just being visually appealing, and any kind of woman whose most intimate parts are willingly available at a few clicks of a button. So literally anyone in the world with internet access is not the kind of woman you should desire. And you have the actual experience of what people would refer to as simping after these women to be very undesirable, humiliating, and useless. What about the argument that PMO is pleasurable? Now, with all of these arguments, there are very many flaws with each of them. Even if I grant this argument, it is obviously true that all the consequences that come with pornography make the momentary short-term pleasure not truly something that should be seen as desirable or attractive. And another argument is to reject the premise that PMO itself is even pleasurable. And to make this argument, it's important to distinguish between sensation and pleasure, which is like an interpretation of a sensation. So to use like an analogy, someone who is trying to maintain fitness goals and sees a lot of value in that, yes, they could acknowledge, hey, I could drink 3 sugary sodas and that would surely invoke, like, I'll feel sensation on my taste buds. And a lot of people would call that experience pleasurable, but because it is so contrary to my goals and my deeper values, I don't find that experience pleasurable, even though I could say, yeah, if I did that, there'd be sensation. So you see the point there, and recognize how consequential it is, how undesirable it is, how valueless it is. You could recognize that experience may have sensation with it, but I'm not going to say that would truly be pleasurable. And then on top of that, one shouldn't allow that to hold themselves back from things that actually are far more pleasurable, like building a more disciplined and healthy life. What about fear of missing out? If someone's not watched in a while and they may be thinking, oh, what if there's some new videos out there that I haven't seen? And just to respond to this argument, just to like make an initial response, it is certainly true. Like, there's no point of worrying about it. It is for multiple reasons, but it is 100% true. Like, it is 100% certain that given the reality of the infinite amount of videos on the internet, that there is some video that in times past you would have found exciting. There's no point of like having this kind of worry, like, oh, is there some video that I haven't seen? Because just by sheer necessity of the reality, yes, there's videos that you haven't seen because there's like an infinite amount of them. There's no point of like worrying about that. The question is that a good thing or is that a bad thing that I'm not going to watch those videos? And the point I'm making is that that's actually a good thing. And a good way of putting this is, instead of fear of missing out, FOMO, you should have ROMO, rejoice over missing out. There's so many better things in a life apart from PMO. I want to honor God with my life. I want to build a more disciplined life. I want to do these things that are far more valuable and important than going back to the stupidity of the nonsensical experience and humiliating nature of PMO. And it doesn't make sense to have fear of missing out over something that is not valuable. So like, to use an example, like obviously fear of missing out, it can be excessive. That's why people can like talk about this being a problem. If someone's so consumed with fear of missing out on certain experiences, they can become like obsessive in their thinking. But there is a sort of like rational, understandable fear of missing out, which one may not even label with that terminology. Just use like an example, like a dad who fears missing out on a good relationship with their children, and so that motivates them to try to strengthen that relationship. In that case, you wouldn't even really call that fear of missing out anyway. That's more of just like a rational respect for that value in their life. But obviously it makes no sense to fear missing out on something that has no value. Just like, oh man, how pitiful is it that I'm not going back to PMO and take on all the consequences mentally and physically, spiritually, just to humiliate myself and harm myself with one of very many useless, nonsensical videos. So it doesn't make sense to fear missing out with pornography, but what it does make sense to actually fear missing out on is the benefits and the good that comes from staying away from that garbage, and what is missed out on with all the consequences mentally, physically, and spiritually. A little bit of a lighting change is a look at the argument that it relieves boredom. And this argument is also very obviously bad. It's basically to say if I find myself doing nothing, that I might as well fill that time by doing something very stupid. And there's so many better things to do, so many productive things to do, so many things aligned with a better life that don't bring all the consequences of going back to PMO. And so a charge here would basically be like, if you're constantly finding yourself feeling like you have nothing to do, that's a false premise. There's invest in better things in life that are actually productive. And then on top of this argument can also have a circular flaw. And what I mean by that is if one is wrongly imputing PMO with like this, seeing it as like a supremely exciting behavior to engage in, then suddenly it can make the rest of life seem pale and boring in comparison. And so PMO actually makes one's life boring, and then it gets credit for allegedly relieving boredom that your usage of it is causing. And so contrary to this, again, there's so many better things to do, so many better things to invest in, so many productive things to do, reading your Bible more, exercising more, building deeper relationships with friends and family, so many things you could look up, like, hey, what are helpful things, what are fun things I could do in my free time, things that are far better than going back to the nonsense of PMO. What about it relieving sadness and stress? This argument is similar to the last one in that a very simple point can be made right off the bat, that even if this argument were true, why go to something so consequential, something so wrong, something so harmful to your life as a whole, when there's so many better ways to manage stress and sadness? PMO is not truly going to help you manage your negative emotions as much as it's just going to try to temporarily distract you from them, only to deepen it in your life. You don't want to be the kind of person, and you aren't the kind of person that needs to go back to PMO to handle your negative emotions. Life can have its difficulties, life can have its rough emotions, but why go to something in those rough moments that makes things even worse? And those kind of rough moments, the amount of progress, the amount of personal growth you can see in your character, mentally, spiritually, by recognizing ways you can respond to those negative emotions in a more productive and godly way, that is a very important way to grow. And it's like one just counterproductively and uselessly throws that aside when they go back to PMO. And if you can think of like a version of you who is walking more deeply with God and living a better and more disciplined life, and you think, is a person who is in the situation in life that I want to be in, are they feeling emotions of negative stress and immediately just going to run to PMO? Or are they realizing like, hey, these negative emotions are a reality of life. I'm not going to sit here and sulk in them and go do something stupid so as to make them worse. How can I respond to these negative emotions in a healthy and productive way? And so it makes absolutely no sense to go to PMO to try to handle negative emotions. And what about it being educational? This argument is also flawed. Not only does pornography not give one an accurate view of relationships and sexuality, it actually distorts one's view of relationships and sexuality. And people may have also like tried to argue like, oh, pornography is valuable. It gives me the ability to figure out what I like, what I want. But then the argument becomes, oh yeah, so what I really want is to be with a woman whose most intimate parts are readily accessible by the few clicks of a button to anyone in the entire world. And I want them to have no will, no ability to talk back to me, no ability to share love with me, no ability to raise my kids. Someone who just robotically gives me sensation only to leave me depressed and regretful. Obviously, one should readily understand that that pales in comparison to getting married and raising a family, and again, like building a godly, disciplined life. And so some simple and quick rebuttals, but these are very important to understand to respond to a lot of these stupid arguments that are brought up. As I mentioned, that even if it were true that there was good in PMO, there are so many consequences that come with it mentally, physically, relationally, and most importantly spiritually, that it would still be absolutely useless and undesirable and stupid to go back to it. And then still, all of these arguments are very bad and very poor. And so you see, like, yeah, there's nothing valuable about going back to PMO. All the arguments that people tend to bring up, they're all problematic, they're all nonsensical. There's nothing valuable about PMO, there's nothing desirable about it, there's nothing attractive about it, there's no good in it such as to see it as desirable, and there's no reason to go back to that garbage.